Hi everyone, welcome back. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Deep Dive. You're back here with Crispin and Robert and me, Stephen Chia. And today we're going to talk about something that's, close to the heart, I think, for many of us in a sense who have children, right? Because, Crispy, you have two sons, and I'm sure the issue of sexual content, pornography has come up somewhere along the way during family conversations, right?
Yep.
Yeah, how have you sort of dealt with that?
I didn't deal with it.
Oh, okay. That's one way to get around the issue.
I basically left it to their dad because that was my theory, right?
Yeah.
So the guys should handle guy stuff, right? But I don't know whether that was a really good idea because one day at dinner, one of them said, "So Dad, what's porn?" And without missing a beat, he said, "Oh, he's a brother of corn." So I guess there are bad dad jokers everywhere.
That's how I was born.
Okay, fine. You see,
we can go
see what I
on
mean?
and on.
No. So, okay, but I jest. In seriousness, yes, we did have to talk about it. But I would say it was uncomfortable. What about you?
I did talk about the birds and the bees with my kids, but not so much about porn or pornography.
Don't the two go to get like?
Not really.
No?
Birds and the bees is how, you got to know how it works, how things work.
Okay.
And also why you shouldn't sleep around and, the consequences, I guess, of that kind of stuff. Whereas pornography seems a little bit of an outlier, but now that we're talking about it today, it has made me think twice.
Yeah, because I think we were lucky. That we had kids before social media really took off. So today that's different, right? I mean, kids are inundated with sexual content, whether they seek it or not. In fact, it's on their social media sites. Sometimes it's the algorithm that works. It's something that they click on and then they can forever be fed the same type of content.
Or these random ads that pop up when you're playing a game or even just reading an article on a different website. So X, formerly known as Twitter, had an update on its website. It said users should be able to create, distribute, and consume material related to sexual themes if it is consensually produced and consensually distributed. So to be clear, sexual content has always existed on X, but it's made this policy now official.
So this has got some people a bit worried. Southeast Asian governments have criticized the move, and some say that they will consider banning the platform. We have, as usual, many questions, and that's why we're here today. Can governments really control this? Is the proliferation of porn as bad as we think it is? How does it affect young children and young people?
So I'll give you some data because teenagers have reported seeing pornographic material more on X than on other adult sites. And research from the UK Children's Commission in January 2023 found that 41% of teenagers aged between 16 and 18 reported seeing pornography on X versus 37% for dedicated adult sites. Now, what this shows is that a social media site, which Twitter, used to be known as Twitter, which is, I would not have batted an eyelid twice if I saw my kids looking at it. It was meant for discussion, news, community, is now serving up sexual content. And it used to be that to consume porn, we had to find it. But now you don't even need to try. It's pretty much in your face.
Yep.
So is this your experience on the ground with young people, Han? I mean, how bad is the situation?
We see folks usually about 18 years and above. Okay, more of them are from between 18 to 45 years old. But increasingly in the last few years, we are actually having referrals from parents who discover that, some as young as 13 years old or 14-year-old actually are exploring pornography as well. But we don't see a huge spike and increase in pornography use in relation to social media in particular. What we are seeing actually is more of people who are still going to good old websites, forum pages, and chat groups. So we haven't seen that sudden spike in social media use. Where we do see actually the more traditional mode, the more mature adults would access their pornography material actually would be more on other social media channels like TikTok, Telegram, for example, and Facebook.
So there are communities that are sharing this information.
Yes, because there are communities actually, and sometimes they don't even have to look very hard, right? And they can just join at communities, and that becomes a very regular delivery supply.
It's almost like what we call a push notification. You're not even looking for it, but it gets sent to you and you're reminded, hey, look at me, check this out.
There are those who look specifically for those. I think the more savvy one would look for specific groups like, you know, the OnlyFans groups and things like that. But there are also those, how they get introduced at the very beginning actually is really by, like what Steve said, you know, by chance they're surfing on the ordinary site and something comes out. Okay.
So that's likely to be younger kids, right?
Yes, yeah. So even though we haven't seen a huge spike right now, okay, but it is a point of concern if they're making it official. It's as good as letting a child go into a supermarket and there, you know, you have your sexual video that's available freely on the shelves.
Shobha, you teach young people?
I do, and I have a slightly different approach.
Okay.
I mean, there's always been a moral panic around porn. One is when we talk about young people, who are we talking about? Because there are different demographics within the young people. And so there's different kinds of access, which is what Han alluded to. But I think we have to unpack adult content, porn as well, because it's not a monolith.
One of the surveys done shows that in Singapore, the average age a child has access to an internet device is 8. 2 years younger than the global average. So at 8, accessing kind of sexual music, do they even know like this is a wrong thing?
So I want to just interrupt that a little bit and say that just because they're accessing the internet doesn't mean they're being faced with porn, right? Again, parents do a lot in terms of, you know, parental controls and conversations with their children and things like that. I mean, the point is not to say that, okay, is porn good or bad? That's not the point. But the point is to say that when we say that they have access to internet equals access to porn, is not always the situation. There are also regulations that can be done. I mean, like sites can be blocked.
Yeah.
So that
but
can
the
be
question
taken
here
care
is that
of.
in some cases it's pushed you. You're playing a game. It's got an ad showing a sexy girl and asking you to come join, check me out. You know.
Yeah.
So
maybe I can add to, you know, what Shobha is sharing here as well. I think, you know, in relation to that example where I raised where parents are bringing children to us. We work with children from between 13 to 17 years old. We are very careful not to stereotype them as having an addiction or porn addiction or even having any sort of problem with sexual behavior. But what it does point out though, if a child is only 12 years old, the child may be accessing certain content that is not age appropriate.
okay.
And for the parents to be alarmed is in that sense, okay, if you're saying they're alarmist, then it also points out the other part of the equation, which is that perhaps the parent have not been looking actively into the sexual education part. Actually, now we can, you know, use blockers and you know, do filters and things like that. So a lot of time, actually, the ones that the parents who brought their young children with us, chances are they are probably not even aware of blockers. And
see.
not even aware of where their children are navigating on the internet. It's good in the sense that the problem is highlighted. It doesn't mean that the child has a problem. It simply means that it's time for the parents to have a good talk with the child.
The good thing is when they come to you, you can alleviate their fears and say, actually, they're not addicted. They've just seen a few things. Don't worry about it. Right?
And that's exactly what we do most of the time. So we will do the assessment. We check for compulsivity. We check for symptoms. We check for consequences. And we say, no, your child is not addicted. What he's going through is a developmental phase. You know,
So
he's at the age where he's
now
curious.
the other question. Age. Is there an age when you can say, okay, you're old enough, you understand what's going on, now porn is all right for you?
Actually, that age is going to keep it's going to keep shifting in society and culture.
Right.
But I think as it stands now, there's a general agreement that 18 is the age of adulthood and access to porn.
Yeah, I think from a developmental point of view and a legal point of view, we say 18.
Yes.
But the reality is that the digital technology is advancing so fast and the social media adoption rate of our young people is so fast.
Yes.
They are accessing information that perhaps may not be appropriate for their age at a much higher pace, faster pace
Much earlier.
than we want it to be.
I want to pick up on this point about parents who, you know, kind of know about parental controls. There's a survey by Google which did and showed that actually Singaporean parents are quite bad when it comes to parental controls. Less than half of them use features such as YouTube parental controls, Google Safe Search. Frankly, none of the people I know use parental controls. They give them some time limit. They say, okay, between this time to this time, you can use your phone, and then it's time for homework.
Yes.
And so, you know what I mean?
Yes, I do know what you mean, and I do think it is an issue. But we also know that parenting has become so much more complex in the digital age.
Yeah.
So I'm also hesitant to push the responsibility completely to parents. One of the things that we definitely need, I think, is a more enhanced approach towards sex education in schools.
Yes. Okay.
The schools are a really fantastic place, right, to provide a space where there are safe adults and safe spaces. And children, young people should be able to raise any kinds of topics, any kinds of questions. If they have somebody that they can talk to about it, whether it be their parents or their teachers, there's a way to process the stuff that they come across.
But that's not going to happen, right? I mean, in our Asian culture, we don't generally come up and say, okay, children, let's come sit down and talk about sex.
See, this is the thing. If we are going to just take that as a given, in our Asian culture, we don't talk to children about sex.
Yeah.
This is going to continue to be a problem. And then we put it to addiction specialists. We make the school take the full responsibility, but we also don't give the kind of spaces for, more
But you were
advanced
just saying
sex
that the
education.
schools should have these conversations.
They should definitely have, but I'm not saying in place of parents. But I think that there is a larger cultural change that's going to be needed.
Like many parents, I'd rather have those conversations with my kids, in my opinion, because I feel that my values and principles may be slightly different from what the mainstream have, or perhaps what the school wants to teach. Maybe they're more conservative, maybe they're more liberal, whatever it may be. But you're right. I think it needs two to tango. The school should play a part, but parents must definitely get involved too, right?
I absolutely agree with that. Yes. And also, I think the conversation that they need to have is not just about the risk of porn use. Really about your body is changing, you're a 12-year-old, what does it mean? So it's actually all in the context of that, the developmental stage. There have been research that show that children actually at the puberty age, when they do this, notice the changes in their body, sometimes they get frightened, sometimes they get anxious because they don't know what's happening. It's coming from that perspective of having the whole conversation of what is sexuality, understanding your body, what is respectful, what is not respectful when it comes to your body and when it comes to somebody else's body. And that's where the conversation can segue into pornography as well.
Yeah. There's also a lot of shame. There's a lot of shame around bodies, around sex.
Yes.
And shame, I think, is the most... it's the most dangerous kind of thing, because it kind of makes kids shut down if they feel that what they say is not going to be received in a positive kind of way.
Sorry, Han.
I also think that beyond, the conversation about understanding sexuality and their body, actually, what's very important is actually understanding that, the sexual behavior and sexual activities alone does not equate to meaningful relationships. And that's the part where when they get into the teenage years, that's a very big part of their life. But with online social media and some of the feeds that they get sometimes, there's, especially with pornography use, there's this equation for some young people that sexual connections equals to relationship, equals to intimacy.
Because you watch a movie and within, 20 seconds of meeting each other, they're in bed with each other.
Yeah. I mean, in real life, that doesn't happen,
But at the same time, sex is a way in which intimacy and all develops. So it's a very nuanced conversation. More important is you've seen, it looks like you've seen a very aggressive, violent, misogynistic video. Let's talk about why that's not going to be helpful for you. Let's talk about why porn is not how sex really looks.
Because we were talking about this earlier, right? They have all these unhealthy attitudes towards sex, if that's the only thing they're exposed to, right? Because they think that women are always ready and available and, they can do whatever they want.
That's the objectification of female, for one. And also then you have a lot of misconception about what sexual relationship is, and more importantly, there's a lot of misconception on what intimacy is.
Yeah, but what's a sensible, practical approach?
There are differences here when it comes to things like social class. It comes to things like education level, right? Even knowledge about parental controls. I think that part of the digital literacy and all that, it has to involve that kind of, everybody rising up together and learning.
So how will we do that? Meaning what? My kid will look at something and say, and be able to
discern.
You see, the
differentiate.
thing is that porn is ultimately it's film. It's not sex because there's a camera in the room.
Yeah.
It's a performance rather than a connection.
So that's exactly what the parent needs to be telling the kid, right?
It's very hard. It's not easy. It's almost like we're expecting everybody to be a therapist. You know, and it is hard. I'm not saying it's not, but there's also no easy solution here. So I think in a kind of technological society, everybody has to skill up a little bit, and we need to do what we can to help that skilling up to happen. It has to do with meeting children where they're at. I have 2 sons. I mean, they're now grown up.
Yeah.
But when one of them was 5 years old, he asked me, where do babies come from? And I tried to give him the age-appropriate answers, what I thought were age-appropriate. It was nighttime. I was putting him to bed. It was dark and my face was going red because I hadn't expected this at 5 years old. But I tried to give him, I read this in a book somewhere, something about mummy and daddy having a special cuddle, for example. But he was like, that makes no sense. What is a special cuddle? What's so special
all
about
the
it?
time.
So finally,
the special cuddle that led up to you.
Yes.
That's the kind of cuddle.
But finally, I told him, and he was like, oh, I see. Do you mean you have to take your pants off for that? And I was like, yes.
Wow, he was.
Yeah.
And then,
Pretty
see, this is what
smart.
I'm saying. He must have heard something on the school bus
Exactly.
or something.
Yeah.
My point is, meet them where they're at.
More young people, and this is the data that's coming out of the police statistics, under the age of 19 are committing sexual crimes in Singapore. In fact, it's jumped to 30% increase from 2022. Now, a common thread of this was early sexual exposure. The government is coming up with what they call a resource package to help counselors. Like, what are the red flags? So, I mean, when you describe it, it sounds like everybody is rational, everybody is great, everybody is loving, everybody wants to do the best. But then these kids end up in trouble, right? Not because they wanted to, but because maybe they didn't have the resources. Nobody knew what the red flags were. So tell me,
I
how
think
parents understand what are the red flags?
most of the time parents don't until the kids get into trouble.
Yes.
Got into the system.
Until
That is
the
a
police
big
calls.
fat red flag.
So we work with
And says there's
quite a few.
there's an upskirt problem here.
So we work
Yeah.
with quite a few of them until they get into trouble, and then they get sent to see a counselor. Or a
then they
therapist.
come to you.
And then you start to have the conversations on what make you do it, what does it do for you, how did you chance upon it.
right.
And a lot of times, what we basically, discover with the child actually would be the thing that the parents have never known as
I
well.
see.
So they are also hearing it
For
for
the
the
first
first time. When I was talking with school counselors, that we need to seriously consider including more parental educational sessions for entry level primary school, for example, from the time that the students enter school, to have more parental engagement sessions to educate parents about digital technology.
If I really wanted to, there are many resources that will help me explain, like
Yeah.
to your 5-year-old, or you can probably find some YouTube video where they've done it in
Where
a
they
very
talk
nice,
about the special
Yeah.
cuddle.
Yeah, you know.
But not all parents are resourceful. So you
That's
have
right.
Yeah,
the
yeah.
other 50% who are not as resourceful.
I
And
want-
they be wondering, where do I get access to this
Okay.
information? What is a blocker? How do I even install a blocker?
Yeah.
Should I be tracking his use patterns, or shouldn't I be using? At what time do I allow him access to his
Yeah.
digital device,
Yeah.
and how much time should I give him access?
Porn is one thing, right? If early access to porn is one thing. And of course, it's hard to know which is cause and which is consequence.
Yeah.
There's a correlation, but whether there's a causation is hard to
Sure.
tell. But I do think one more thing is that generally when there is misogyny, widespread within the culture, this tends to then go into whatever kind of platform or tool. If you look at upskirt videos, for example, sure, the technology has enabled certain things, but the notion that when there is a particular kind of technology, you can actually use it to invade a woman's privacy, against consent, against respect, this is a cultural issue. The idea that everybody deserves
Right.
to be respected for who they are starts at home.
Are their actions a consequence of what they've been feeding themselves on? They will argue that they are easily distracted, they will overcome, and could it be that because this guy has been feeding off a bunch of voyeuristic videos and he's seen others do it, and that has led to his behavior?
I've been working with people with compulsive sexual behavior for many years. And one thing we always want to point out, not every person who is addicted to pornography surfing, for example, is a sex offender.
Right,
Yes.
right.
Yeah,
Well
so they are
said,
not
yes.
the same. I have worked with sex offenders basically who are more on the voyeuristic spectrum,
Yeah.
okay, who seldom and hardly surf porn because that is their mode of sexual arousal. But one thing we have observed based on the people that we work with, though, is that very often sexual offenders, okay, how do they chance into that particular habit? Very often it starts from a young age, introduction to particular sexual violence content.
Okay.
In the early days when they chance upon pornography. In other words, instead of looking at what we call vanilla porn, okay, they will be looking at sexual violence
Right.
porn.
Okay, so
And
this is
it's-
hardcore porn in a way.
And it kind of
Well,
imprints
Not-
in
that-
their
or
or
mind.
sexual
I suppose.
violence. So
Well, hardcore,
specifically,
if you look at upskirt, actually,
That's considered
how
the
hardcore
vanilla
is that?
version, right?
But no, if
No,
you
it's
look
not.
at upskirt,
Oh, it's not?
upskirt
What?
is sexual offense.
It's an offense.
Okay.
What?
It's a sexual offense,
but if you're
it's not exactly
watching a video
hardcore.
of someone else who has done that voyeuristic act,
Yes. Yeah. So if you
Right?
if you can imagine, okay, they have videos and they are watching someone doing a voyeuristic
Yeah.
act, okay, but they get the sexual arousal from it.
Yeah.
But it's not your typical hardcore porn because there's no nudity there. Actually,
That's right.
if you've seen an upskirt video,
that's what
basically
you're
most of the time it's dark. They
Yeah,
can't
that's
they
true.
can't see the thing. But this is where they get the sexual arousal, and this is what we mean
Okay.
by the risk for young people being exposed to highly stimulating sexual content at a very young age is that that's where their brain is forming at a very young age. If they are aroused with certain type of content, we call what the formation of the sexual arousal template is kind of, shaped at a very early age.
It's wired, I suppose.
It's
I
wired.
see.
It's kind of hardwired. That this is where they get the sexual arousal from this, not from the usual
and
sex.
will that lead to more devastating consequences in the long term?
Well, which is why we talk about early education on what is right and what is wrong. Having the education on values and all are very important, because if they have that as the compass and they know that, hey, this is wrong, okay, they are able to pull themselves back. But if they never had the conversation,
Right.
and basically all they're seeking is sexual stimulation, and you have a child, for example, who's highly stressed in an environment where there's not a lot of communication going on with the parents or with any safe adults, okay, this is their way of basically
Yeah.
relieving stress.
Any, last points you would like to make to our listeners?
I would say, this is a digital age we're living in,
Yeah.
It is a given. It's not going away, okay? It just makes parenting a much more challenging and demanding task.
So what do parents need to do?
Equip yourself with, everything that you can. Learn about technology, learn about the good part of it, but also learn about the risks as well. And along the way, journey with your child when they start the digital technology journey. Don't just leave them to discover
Yeah, but
it
without
on their
shaming
own.
and going berserk
Yes.
on them when you
Yes.
stumble upon
Exactly.
them
Yeah,
trying
I can
this
see those
stuff.
judgmental eyes already.
Yeah.
That's me.
Yes.
Yeah, Shobha.
So I would say that I definitely think the lack of shaming, and so there is a lot of work that parents have to do on ourselves, because we have to confront when our children show themselves to be sexual beings. It forces us to confront everything that we had assumed about their innocence, about what is age appropriate, about whether we are ready or not to have that conversation with them. But we cannot just abandon them. And I think it's needed. A whole culture kind of approach is needed, because porn does not occur in a vacuum.
Right.
But it's a tough conversation to have, and I think sometimes we think, okay, this Thursday, 9 o'clock, we're going to sit down and have that conversation. It doesn't work that way, right?
It doesn't work that way.
I
God
found that.
forbid.
Yeah, I mean,
I won't turn up on Thursday.
No, it'll happen while you're folding laundry together.
Yes, exactly.
Or when
Or you're
out of
driving
the
them for
blue.
tuition.
Or while you're watching a movie.
I think it doesn't have to be a one conversation, but
No.
over a period of time, we can start introducing and talking about some of these. Because I guess at the end of the day, I feel that as a parent, I want my child to be able to come to me at any time and say, Dad, help me with this. I'm not sure about this or that. You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, I mean, I have a different take, Steve. I don't think that all parents are equipped
I agree.
Yeah.
to have this conversation. It needs to be nuanced, as you say. There should be no judgment. Some households are very religious, for example.
Yeah.
Some households shut kids down because it's just uncomfortable.
Yeah, fair
so
enough.
I agree with you. I think, unfortunately, the schools may be able to do a bit more than parents, because in a school, first of all, you have our kids for 6-7 hours a day.
Yes.
That's often more than the parents have. That's one. Number two, you're kind of neutral ground, right? In a way, you don't have to go into the values. Just talk about the stuff that you might see. And what could it do to your brain? The way Han was talking about, and like early exposure. What are some of the issues? Why is it okay? Why is it not okay? When is it like consent, stuff like that?
But I guess it's finding that sweet spot, because we know it can get a bit dicey and a bit sensitive, and some parents may not like certain conversations that occur in the class.
Yeah.
Okay. This is one topic that we will not come to any kind of an answer here today, but we do value insights shared by our guests. And of course, for all of you listening in or watching us, please leave us your comments. Let us know what you think, your point of view on this issue as a parent as well. We would love to hear from you.
Thanks to the team that works very hard: Tiffany Ang, Joanne Chan, Janani Johari, Rosli Pute, and Saye Wint. If you liked this episode, give us a rating, or better yet, share your views on the topic. Till next time, goodbye.